Hello friends and welcome to the Noclip podcast. Noclip podcast number 17, I believe. Some people get confused because sometimes a number gets skipped, but that's because those podcasts are for patrons only. This one's for mass consumption, unlike the video game we're about to talk about. Jim Stormdancer, thank you so much for joining us today.
I believe this makes me being on the podcast more often than you've been.
Yeah, this makes you a regular guest now.
Okay.
Twice.
So, I can introduce you to other cool people who live in the Bay Area if you want.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Who would those people be?
Oh, I'm not going to list their names on the air.
Because if you don't mention Brandon Sheffield, he'll be really angry, probably.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe we should get Mike Micah, who's our landlord, in.
Mike's cool.
That'd be cool. Shout out to Sonic, by the way, who just left. They're trying to install our internet at the moment, but they decided to leave so we could podcast. That was cool of them. Hopefully we'll have internet soon, and I won't be connecting to Other Ocean's random Wi-Fi drop that's here at the moment. That would be wonderful. Let's talk about a new video game, Jim.
Okay.
A new video game in a series that perhaps you have heard of.
I'm waiting.
The extended adventures of young Gordon Freeman.
Oh.
We're sitting down with somebody who has made an Epistle 3 game.
Oh, yes, that's right. I actually, most people don't know this, I made Half-Life 3.
You made a Half-Life 3.
I like to think of it as making Half-Life 3. You can find it on itch.io under the name Epistle 3, along with several other games also named Epistle 3, as part of the Epistle 3 Jam, where after Mark Laidlaw made a blog post that was a slightly debranded storyline for what his vision of what Half-Life 3 would have been, Laura Miche organized a game jam, which was the purpose of which was to, now that the story belongs to us, the community, let's us, the community, make Half-Life 3 together. And there were maybe 30 games submitted. Mine was one of them.
They were great. I played a bunch of them. We featured Laura and some of the games on our Half-Life documentary we made last year, Unforeseen Consequences, which now, thanks to this news, is horribly dated.
I have to say, I didn't know why you had invited me specifically to be on this podcast, but now I understand.
To me, I feel like we're of a similar generation. We grew up playing these games, perhaps, and mostly I just kind of wanted to get, like, I'm a game player. I'm a quote-unquote game journalist. I don't really think much of what I do is journalism, but I do think it's always advantageous to have a developer's perspective on stuff like this. Oh, sure,
yeah.
Especially when it comes to preview, because so much of preview is kind of, I don't know, looking under the curtain a little bit, or they're only showing you half of what's going on. Also, I wanted to just kind of because you weren't even here. You were off in Hawaii last week, so you know nothing, basically.
There was a little bit of information about this game that came out before that.
Right. But
I've been largely off the grid, yeah.
So today we're going to jump through basically all the sort of the trailers come out. We watched the trailer before the podcast. I have a bunch of information sort of largely about the game, and we've also got some questions from the community. So apologies to anyone who isn't a big Half-Life fan, but we'll make it entertaining regardless. And also we're going to answer the question maybe of because this is a virtual reality only game, so whether or not it's worth it. If you want to buy VR, which headset you should get, because I know we're coming up on that time of year again,
right,
where we celebrate when the Pilgrims gave the Native Americans really good deals on televisions. That's what the whole thing's about, right?
That's what I heard, yeah.
Perfect. I'm an immigrant. I hasn't come up yet. I haven't done the nationality test.
Oh, you have to earn your TV. I'm sorry.
All right, let's jump into it. So, Half-Life, Alyx. Half-Life, Alyx. Alyx spelled Alyx.
Right.
That's what we're going with. That's what they're calling it. It is a VR-only game. It's coming out March 2020. They announced it last week. Jeff Keighley got in a room with a bunch of Valve people. Jeff Keighley, who we interviewed for our Half-Life doc.
And somehow let nothing slip.
I don't know. My keen journalism skills couldn't break through to Jeff Keighley, who lied to our face, but that's fine. It's going to work with Steam VR headsets, which means Oculus, HTC Vive, I think the Windows mixed reality thing. How are you with VR? Have you tried much VR? Do you care for VR? You're an experimental developer. Is it something that appeals to you?
If I had the $600 back when they were doing the Oculus Kickstarter, I would have gotten it and probably made a bunch of prototype stuff. I almost made a game for Facebook back when they were launching their social VR platform.
Gosh, I forgot about that whole thing.
Yeah, I think the whole thing stopped, just didn't happen. And also the deal never went through. I think they just couldn't get the paperwork signed, but they sent me an Oculus headset,
right,
just in case I was going to use it. And I never did because my laptop wasn't good enough.
Oh, that's such a shame.
So that's my experience with VR. Well, no, that's I've also used other people's VR headsets. I played Beat Saber. That was fun.
Right. Yeah, I do. I feel like most people's VR experience is using someone else's VR headset.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't really. I think it still doesn't really make sense to own one.
Right.
Although,
especially not in the Bay Area, maybe, where space is at a premium.
Right. Yeah. The friend that I had he's still a friend that I played Beat Saber on his headset, had a bunch of modded songs.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know if that's legit. I don't know if that's something that's like part of the software. I don't know if you get like the cheap Oculus was it Quest, the new one?
Yeah.
The $400 like standalone thing. I don't know if you can put modded songs on that thing, but if you can, I bet that would be a pretty good exercise machine.
That'd be rad. That sounds like Audio Surf. Do you remember Audio Surf?
I do remember Audio Surf.
That game was so popular. That was like the hottest shit on Steam for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I remember being really like as someone who loves rhythm games, I remember being really annoyed with Audio Surf because it's not really a good rhythm game. Like it would kind of it would make up note. They weren't even notes. They were like things you were supposed to grab and things you were supposed to dodge, and they wouldn't really match up to the music except like the whatever software they wrote to process the music and figure out like where the notes should go. They knew where to find snare drum hits.
Totally, yeah.
And nothing else.
So drum and bass was like the only, like, you couldn't put like a Journey song in there or like pop music.
Right. And so like
dance.
When I would play Rock Band or I would play Amplitude, I would do really well by getting into the flow of the song. But in order to do well at Audio Surf, I had to ignore the music.
Yeah, because it was sending you the wrong signals.
Right.
I've been a VR. I wouldn't say I was an early adopter, but about 3 years ago, because I thought we'd end up doing docs on VR. I mean, we literally not even. I don't even think we've. I think Bethesda might be the only studio we've interviewed that's even done VR. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a Vive and. I played a decent amount. I played it a lot more when we moved to Maryland because we were just stuck in the house more and we'd space for it. So I still have that, and I played a lot of first-person shooters on it. And what's interesting about the Half-Life stuff, and we'll get into it, is that a lot of the stuff in the trailers is kind of stuff that is now pretty common for VR games, in, like shooters, like a lot of the loading your gun, that type of thing. Some of the specifics around like picking items up or picking up individual bullets, some of that seems new. But yeah, some of that stuff is par for the course at this stage. There's been a lot of first-person shooters that have either been retrofitted with VR, like Half-Life 2. Like you can play Half-Life 2 hacked in VR,
right?
Or other games like Arizona Sunshine or whatever that you can play like that.
One thing I thought was interesting about the trailer was they never showed you moving more than a couple of feet.
Yeah,
and I'm presuming that's because they can't really depict motion through space without making you motion sick, or at least without making a significant percentage of players motion sick. And so they do tricks like you can point at the ground and push a button to teleport over there, because when you teleport there's no acceleration, which is actually what makes you sick. When the acceleration that you see doesn't match the acceleration that you feel. That's what
it is.
So you can have a game like A Reckless Disregard for Gravity, where you're moving at a constant rate, and that won't make you motion sick because you're not accelerating.
What was the game there was a game I played that was there's a lot of these games like hook games, like Quake, the hook mod type of stuff where you've got hooks for, you can shoot out like Just Cause style grapple hook things and swing around. And even that one, you're right, it was the momentum changes in that was what was making me feel queasy. So is that why when you're in a car, as long as you're looking at the front, as long as your brain can interpret how fast you're going and it's not too much like
right
backwards and forwards.
When you're looking down at a book or whatever, that's what makes me motion sick, because what you're seeing doesn't match the acceleration you feel.
Right. The other aspect maybe of this as well is that one of the details of the game is the way in which you move around, which is a common problem with VR games is the teleport thing just feeling, I guess, not realistic. Is that what?
Right. If they're trying to make an immersive experience, that's not particularly immersive, but like games are full of things that you just ignore.
Right. Yeah.
So like if you can learn to just ignore this too, then it's probably fine.
Along with the every time you reload your gun, the clips for some reason don't magically disappear. All that sort of stuff. All right, let's get to the top line of what this game is from some of the pages on Valve's website and also on Steam. Set between the events of Half-Life and Half-Life 2, Alyx, Vance, and her father Eli mount an early resistance to the Combine's brutal occupation of Earth. The loss of the 7-hour war is still fresh. In the shadow of the rising Combine fortress known as the Citadel, residents of City 17 learn to live under the rule of the invaders. This just sounds like Half-Life 2. But among the scattered population are two of Earth's most resourceful scientists, Dr. Eli Vance and his daughter Alyx, the founders of the fledgling resistance. You and your father were relocated to City 17. In the years since, you continued your clandestine scientific activity, performing critical research and building invaluable tools for the few humans brave enough to defy the Combine. Every day you learn more about your enemy, and every day you are working towards finding a weakness. Lean around broken walls and under barnacles to make an impossible shot. Rummage through shelves and find a healing syringe and some shotgun shells. Manipulate tools to hack alien interfaces. Tear a headcrab off your face and throw it out a window. VR was built for the kind of gameplay that sits at the heart of Half-Life. Half-Life Alyx supports a variety of play environments, locomotion methods, and input devices. There you go. Bit of a hard turn there. 4 paragraphs in. Apparently it's set between Half-Life 1 and 2, but they have said that you should have played Episode 2 before you played this. Also, the X on the logo might be a sort of nod towards some sort of the design of it, towards some sort of time travel, I guess. Perhaps that's what the scuttlebutt is at the moment around the game, and them surely saying that you should have played Episode 2,
right?
Which happens obviously years after the events of this, or maybe months after the events of this, is
right. It might end up being set between every Half-Life game.
Right. Yeah. We'll just jump around all over the place. Maybe that's what it is. It'll be like the what is it? The lab where you just have like these little experiences. It sounds like it's one long game. From I think it was. Sorry, I'm jumping through all the details here. This seems to be connected to. Oh yeah, we should actually, before I start editing, shout out to Tyler McVicker, who runs Valve News Network, who I feel like has been covering this story for like 7 years at this stage. This does seem to have grown away from something he's reported on a lot, which is something called Codename Shooter, which was a Vive lab, the lab with all those mini games that you get with Vive. It was a game that was being developed within that never got put in. That's apparently, it seems like it's got some of the DNA from that. Jeff Keighley said that it took 15 hours to play, so that will be in line with most of the Half-Life games.
That's a serious AAA experience. That's very unlike what most VR experiences you would expect to be. Like, I don't think I want to wear one of those helmets for 15 hours.
Yeah,
but
what's the average play length on something like that, right?
Right, yeah. I don't know.
I'm not one of these people who's played, like... Did you ever see the folks who play, like, Skyrim in VR? I guess that, like, literally Skyrim VR, you can... That's not even a mod. That's like a game you can buy.
They probably have the bodybuilder necks. You know,
they're like Formula 1 drivers.
Right.
Just like tree trunks.
Yeah.
It's...
Is that true? Do the Formula 1 drivers, because they have to wear those heavy helmets or something?
It's because the G-forces.
Oh, sure, that makes sense.
They pull like 2.5 lateral Gs going around corners, so they just like... Their helmets are strapped to the cars. They have like... I also do a Formula 1 podcast, in case you didn't know.
Sure.
The sides of them are strapped to the inside of the cars as well. But yeah, they've got like ridiculous...
That does sound ridiculous.
Necks. Yeah. For their massive heads and their massive egos. Teleporting, room scale, controller walking, and smooth locomotion are going to be, I guess, ways of getting around this world. I think that it'll be the different headsets and also the different ways you want to play. But the main sort of hook, I guess, is what they're calling the gravity gloves. So tell me if you've heard this before, but they are gloves that you wear that basically allow you to be a Jedi. So you can grab things like the gravity gun, throw them at people. There's stuff in the trailer where they're Alyx's. You control Alyx, by the way. Should have mentioned that probably. Where you are grabbing what looks like grenades from Combine soldiers, throwing cardboard boxes full of packing peanuts at people, pulling head crabs off your face.
And this tech was lost before Gordon showed up.
It's always the problem, isn't it?
Right.
Where you go back and do like your Halo Reach or like any of these games that are set before, especially when you do it so far after, because it's been a while. Like we did the Half-Life doc 20 years after Half-Life came out. Half-Life 2 came out in 2004, so that's 15 years ago. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, I want to say, is 2007. Latest.
That sounds right. Yeah,
because the orange box I think was 2008. And from the game, I guess the render of the trailer, it looks like it's graphically improved as well. Like it does look different. It looks similar but different. What was your vibe when you saw the trailer in terms of the art direction? Because did it feel like Half-Life to you?
Yeah, it looked very, very much. I have actually a few months ago I replayed Half-Life 2.
Oh, cool!
Just apropos of nothing, and it looked very similar. Like it looked like what you would remember Half-Life 2 looking like if you forgot that it was from 2004.
Right.
So they did a good job there, I think.
It's a weird evergreen game like that. Like World of Warcraft seems that way too, where it kind of just...
Well, World of Warcraft looked dated at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So it fits as well nowadays.
Well, what are some of your favorite aspects of Half-Life 2, like in terms of gameplay or levels, or any stuff stand out to you?
I think honestly the world building is the most interesting thing about it. And when you were saying the hook is the gravity gloves, the hook is going to be, if they nail it, the writing and the world building, because that's what people come to Half-Life for. Like at least that's what I come to Half-Life for. I'm not super interested in shooting a bunch of stuff. When I was replaying Half-Life 2, when you get to after the canal section where you're running around on a hoverboat,
right?
You get to the lab, and they were talking about how like we're about to start on this important research to beat the Combine. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm ready to play a Zachtronics game inside this Half-Life game. But no, they just had me go shoot people again immediately after that.
Isn't it a shame when you know that's going to happen? Where like you're
well, especially because I've already played the game.
Right. You just know it's not going to do like a from dusk till dawn genre shift halfway through the game.
Right.
That's something you do in your
games.
games.
Who would do a thing like that?
Yeah. Right. It's you're right. I guess I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Even Half-Life 1, when I think about it, like on the face of it, like there was interesting enemies in it, but most of the time the reason it was fascinating was because this is like a real place. Like people worked here, and now it's gone to shit.
Yeah, it was very convincing. And a lot of games do that nowadays, so that's another reason that this is maybe not that exciting.
Right.
Because that sort of storytelling is now, like, game writing has just gotten a lot better in the past 20 years.
And a lot of the stuff from Valve, like Chet Falsek has obviously left the company. Mark Laidlaw has left the company.
Yeah.
There was a note. I did some research just to see who's on this team or what the team looks like. So there's a couple of different things here. Valve has said it's their biggest team yet. It's a third of the company is working on this. A third of the team had worked on the previous Half-Life games. I take that back. But it's the biggest amount of people that they've had, including Dota, which seems a bit crazy. This also may lend credence to the idea that this is one of two Half-Life projects that are going on, that maybe they have a non-VR one in the works. So one of the interesting things that's happened is obviously Campo Santo, who made Firewatch. They got bought out by Valve, I believe it was 2 years ago now. They moved up to Seattle, and they were working on the game that they had announced in the Valley of Gods. Do you remember the trailer for that or any of that stuff?
Yeah, that was a fantastic trailer.
Yeah, it was. Firewatch. Did you play Firewatch?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, I think people really adored that game and what it did, and first-person storytelling while still being, I don't know.
If you guys haven't seen it, go check out Jane's, I forgot her last name, one of the animators on that game wrote a blog post about the tech behind one of the protagonist's hair.
Yeah.
like because depicting like hair of that level of curliness hadn't really been done properly in a game before.
Right.
It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, her surname it's like NG. I don't know how to
That's probably why I don't know.
pronounce it. Yeah, I don't know how to
remember
pronounce
it.
it. Apologies. It's like in or something. I don't know. But yeah, she's prolific on Twitter and has puts up awesome work up there as well. But one of the things to note is that her, along with two of the other sort of more forward-facing Camposada folks, Jake Rodkin, of course, and Claire Hummel, they've removed In the Valley of Gods from their Twitter
Right.
profiles.
Yeah, so I tweeted about a very like cynical tweet about Half-Life Alyx, saying this was like everybody who cares about narrative games is quit Valve, and I still think that like a lot of those people are gone.
Right.
But I was approached by a couple of people, like just people who know better than me, talk about how like like this is public knowledge. We know that Eric Wolpaw and Jay Pinkerton, the Portal 2 writing team, are working on this thing.
Right.
And there's every reason to believe that the Camposanto folks are working on this thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it's going to be good. Like I was definitely like I was being cynical because of like Half-Life, like where the Valve just really kind of hasn't made a game that's interested in me in a very long time, and they've been making a lot of money instead.
Right.
So like, who can fault them?
Yeah, like when you look at the timeline here, when you see that like the last time they made like a narrative focused game was, I guess, Portal 2.
It was like 2009.
Yes, that's
yeah.
like it's a decade ago. Like people's careers in video games don't tend to exist on that type of time frame.
And that exodus that I was talking about of like people who want to work on that sort of game, that really happened.
Right, yeah. It's odd that some of them have come back. Like,
well, I think so. I'm pretty sure that Jay Pinkerton and Eric Wolpaw are working as contractors.
right, yeah.
So
It's also worth mentioning that apparently as well, Laidlaw is not working on this, but apparently he is involved in some way.
Okay.
There was a quote from Greg Coomer here that says, "As with all Valve games, the writing is a collaboration between the writers and all the animators, actors, and the level designers who implement the narrative within the game itself. While Mark hasn't worked on Half-Life Alyx directly, he's probably lying on a beach somewhere. He's been generous with his time answering all the writers' questions throughout the game's development." So, if nothing else, it's nice to see that there's not too much bad blood there. Maybe that's, who knows, maybe that's
hopefully they're
Wolpaw just
consulting
talking
with
to him.
some of the Epistle 3 people as well.
God, like I in a way I would love for, like, they should do a play test where they just invite people like Valve News Network and the Epistle 3 people, like just the people who have been giving a shit about Half-Life.
Oh, yeah.
for the past, like, hey, if they send us an invite, I'll happily fly up to Seattle to give it a go. I'll sign whatever friend EAs you want. Yeah, it's the worry, I think, was that it's such a difficult thing creating a sequel to a game with that much expectation.
Well, and that's why they didn't make it a sequel. That's why they called it Half-Life Alyx.
Right.
So it's a little bit of an end run around. It's not really what you're waiting for, but it's going to sell to the same people. So it's kind of a way to not have to disappoint people. And
I think from the Jeff Keighley interview that happened as well, it was launched that day. It's about 15 minutes. You can catch it on. I think it's not. Maybe it's on the Game Awards channel. It's the return of Jeff's. He did this. We talked about in the doc. He did this series called Final Hours, where they're like written, mostly written, although there are video components as well. Sort of breakdowns of a game right before it launched. He did Half-Life 1. He did Half-Life 2. He did Portal 1. I'm not sure if he did Portal 2.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a Portal to Final Hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had that same friend who I played Beat Saber on his Oculus headset. I have a family sharing thing on with Steam with him, and he was very disappointed when he downloaded Portal to Final Hours, and it wasn't a Portal sequel.
Yeah, it's like it's like a multimedia presentation of the of Jeff's thing. It's like written and video. So I mean, I'm a little bit. I'd love to have done something on this. I would love to do something on this, but I think there's probably no better person to do something on this than
it's taken care of.
Yeah, he's been covering Half-Life for his entire career, so more power to him. A couple more details on I guess the trailer stuff. We saw a Destroyed City 17. We saw head crabs, which I have written down here as dead crab by accident. Which maybe that's what we should call the ones in Ravenholm.
That's what you call the ones after you shoot them.
Exactly. I'm not killing them. I'm just converting them into dead crabs.
And now they're zombie head crabs.
Speaking of the writing, Rhys Darby is in it from Flight of the Conchords or What We Do in the Shadows, the famous Kiwi actor. That was a fun bit of flavor when he threw the gun out the...
Yeah.
You chuckled. I chuckled when I heard that.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, that was a good bit. Something called a vault. It looks like this floating spaceship thing with power lines running up to it. At least that's what I think. Maybe Alyx's voice actor was referring to. You can use the HEV powering thing. It's like charging your glove while you're shooting with the other hand.
Sure.
Turning corners. That seemed neat. There was a barnacle nest. It was throwing boxes. A couple of different puzzles. I'm sure there'll be a lot of environmental puzzles where you're waving your hands around and doing things. Antlions were in there as well, which suggests that you're going to be outside of City 17 for at least part of it. Yeah, so there's a couple of different things to sort of chew on there. What were your initial impressions from seeing the trailer? Like, what do you want from a Half-Life game? And was any of those desires satiated by what you saw?
Well, realistically, what's going to happen is I'm not going to get a VR headset and I'll probably watch a Let's Play.
That's the way video games work in 2019 or 2020, right?
It is very often the case, yeah. And I'm sure that it's going to have some good writing in it and some cool stuff to look at. And we saw some of that in the trailer, so... That's my relationship with video games these days.
Okay, what if I told you that you had a friend, this Irish guy, who had a VR headset?
Am I supposed to reach under my chair now?
This isn't an Oprah Winfrey situation. What if I told you that Irish guy, for better or worse, because he's such a Half-Life fanboy...
You were talking about wanting to make a VR doc. You could make a documentary of me playing Half-Life Alyx.
What if I told you I ordered an Index?
I don't know what that is.
That's the new Half-Life VR thing.
Okay, all right.
This was my Christmas present to myself. The minute I saw it, I was like, I'm doing it. I have a Vive, but I want to play this the way it was meant to be played, just like NVIDIA told me all those years ago. So I think the original idea for this room in here was a podcast room. I think now it's just going to be the Half-Life Alyx room.
Okay.
So you can come over and play.
Wow.
If you'd like to. In fact, I could probably just give you the Vive if you wanted a loan of that. You could play that so if your laptop is powerful enough now. So we had a lot of emails. We'll get to the emails in a second about the whole VR question about like what would be the right way, what should I buy, all that sort of stuff. So there has been a bunch of reporting about there are certain things you'll only be able to do on the Index because the Index has these new fancy controllers which sort of react to individual finger squeezes and like you've got far more dexterity, I guess, than you'd have on, say, the original Vive wands, which were kind of just a binary clenched fist, open fist thing.
They couldn't do the point your finger out thing.
That was an Oculus thing, right?
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, I think that was Oculus. And then PlayStation VR is...
Yeah, there was one of them where you could do finger guns, and they could tell the difference between that and a fist.
But you couldn't do shaka.
Right.
Which really, I think that's like
you couldn't throw up the horns.
No, unfortunately not. That's some far-flung future shit.
Right, yeah.
We're getting there. That's the mountain we're trying to climb here, Jim.
Working on horn tech.
Exactly. So they've pointed towards some of this. I'm actually going to read off this this quote from Broden Grimes. It's a bit long, but it may give some context for this. We've tried really hard to make the best use of the Index controllers. These are the new Valve ones. For those who have them, while also ensuring that those who still don't have a great experience with Half-Life Alyx. There's a small set of things that the Index controllers can do that other controllers can't do at all, and they're fun but not required, like being able to crush a can that you're holding in your hand. It's going to be integral to the start. Every time G-Man talks when you're drinking a soda, you're just going to crush it.
A Valve employee runs up and puts a soda can in your hand.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the haptic is. There haptic feedback on those things?
I don't know.
I don't know. I should have probably asked that question before I spent all that money on it. But there's a larger set of things that could work on tracked controllers, yet end up being better on Index controllers because we've developed them in concert with the game. The most obvious example being core interactions players have with objects in Half-Life Alyx. Picking up, holding, dropping, throwing, and manipulating. Players performing the basic actions many times throughout the game, and over years of playtesting we found that combining the player's trigger usage with the tracked finger locators, that's what you were talking about, was the most successful way of supporting their intentions. So while you can perform most actions with just a trigger or a button, we just think it feels more natural with the way the way the index controls operate. Finally, the ability for the player to relax their hands without dropping their controllers turned out to be a significant factor in our Half-Life Alyx playtests. As our index controller prototype started replacing our older controllers in playtests, we started seeing players being able to play for longer stretches of time because they weren't required to hold on to real-world objects all that time. This wasn't really something we saw as a problem in the early days of VR development, but now that VR games are becoming longer and more fully featured, we think it's becoming more important. Is that important, or should we be encouraging people to take breaks when they're playing these types of games?
I don't think we have any data on, like, has anybody died because they wore a VR helmet for too long, or like even had eye strain?
Yeah, I don't know, because I imagine the people who would have access to that tech would be the people least incentivized to find out those answers.
Right.
So I guess there's a lot of options here. The best way to play it is that, but there's other alternatives to buying it. I'm just going to give a lowdown because we're entering the Black Friday Cyber Monday. Cyber Monday is always such a disappointment. I just think the internet's going to be full of sex, and it's not. It's such a shame. We're entering that phase, so people might be on their on their credit card trigger finger this weekend. So I've done a bit of research. So the full kit that you would, if you had nothing, if you're starting from having no VR at all and you wanted all of the VR and you wanted all of the Vive Index VR, the full kit costs $1,000, and that's presumably, that is before tax and shipping.
Does that include your PC?
That does not include your PC,
okay,
which also needs to be up. I don't know if they have on the website for Vive, they had a application you could run that would benchmark you.
Right.
I don't know if they have that for this particular game yet. That might be telling. But yes, you will obviously need to have a half decent computer with multiple HDMI outputs, I want to say, as well.
Wow.
Which I feel like most graphics cards do at this stage, but just worth considering. So I think that's the case. Well, there's a breakout box for the Vive. I don't know if there is one of the Index. There probably is.
My laptop doesn't have any HDMI outputs.
Does it not?
No.
How does it output?
It has USB-C.
Oh, so it's a Mac, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, nightmare.
I know, right?
So the full kit, this would include the headset, the Vive Index headset, two controllers, and the Index base stations, not space stations, which are the little guys you stick on the corner of your room to create the chaperone and all that. The Index base stations are different to the normal, I guess, the ones that they had for the Vive originally, in very slight ways. I think you can make a bigger play area, which is probably the least of people's worries at this stage. But from what I've heard, I talked to Will Smith, friend of the podcast. He said that the normal Vive ones are generally fine. The new ones have better, the Index base stations have better tracking and they can go longer, but generally the other ones are fine if you have them. If you wanted to buy the headset and controllers, it's worth mentioning all of these packages come with the game as well. If you buy a Index before the end of 2019, you get the game for free. I think the game is the retail price on it is $50, I want to say. I'll look that up in a second. The headset and controllers with the game for free. Maybe free is a relative term here. $749, but it's out of stock at the moment. The headset on its own, it's $500 with the game for free, also out of stock. The controllers on their own, $279 with the game, also out of stock. So right now the only way of buying it is dropping the full $999.
Or you could get the Steam controller for, what is it, like $6 now?
So they've discontinued it, is it?
Yeah.
I saw that today, yeah.
Yeah, it's for like some crazy low price plus shipping. So you can get that, and then you can play Spelunky on...
Which is right now is a better game experience than Half-Life Alyx.
Oh, for sure.
Because you can't
Right.
play Half-Life Alyx.
Right, unless you work at Valve.
Right.
Then Spelunky sucks.
Did we talk about Spelunky 2 when you were here last time?
No, we didn't.
I played it briefly at PAX East. There was one booth at the PlayStation booth that just had it running. And I went up, and I couldn't tell if, maybe you can speak to this as the developer, I couldn't tell if it was set to some sort of nightmarish, like, game conference mode, because it seemed like there was way more mobs than you'd usually, way more like enemies spawned than usual.
Maybe Spelunky 2 is just like, it's like it's like world 5 of Spelunky 1, and then you move on from there.
That would be terrific. I do feel like we've all gotten a lot better at playing that type of game.
Yeah,
In the intervening
I
years.
think you're right.
Yeah, so I guess we'll have to find out. Wonder if we should get Derek over here one day to tell us. I'm sure he'll spill all.
Oh yeah, one of the cool guys who lives in the Bay Area.
Good point. Yeah, you're right. No, he moved. He's in LA now.
Oh no.
Yeah, because I actually did reach out to him when I moved back, and he was like, "Oh, I've moved."
Oh,
So-
now I'm sad.
I know. One less cool person. You can buy the Index base stations on their own right now for $150. You don't get the game free, and they're in stock, but whatever. If you're interested in other headsets, the Oculus Quest, which seems to be the one that people are... It feels like the best Oculus one you can use now. It's the wireless one. Much of the Oculus Rift S stuff has been backwards
Yeah, and
implemented
that's
into
one
it.
that you actually don't need a PC for it.
Correct.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, it's mad science. You can buy, I want to say, the 64 gigabyte version for $400, and then the other one is $500. Is that 128? I don't know. It's something else. For the updated version, so that's pretty good, and you get all the controllers and everything with that as well. The Oculus Rift S, which seems to be less popular now that the Quest is getting so much support, is $399, and then the Vive Cosmos, which I know absolutely nothing about, the new version of the Vive is $699. So, you're paying through the year no matter what, no matter what version of virtual reality you take, which is probably why, like Jim, a lot of you are going to watch this on Twitch.
Or play at an especially rich friend's house.
Or a crowdfunded studios podcast room, which
It's
has been
like
converted.
being rich.
Crowdfunded?
Yeah.
It is. If I would be very rich if
You just kept that money.
I just kept that money, which is something like, especially in the early days of Noclip, it would be very easy to be that shithead, I think. To
You could probably only get away with it for a couple of months, though.
right? You think,
Just say you're working on something really long.
oh my god, I can't
Like,
imagine.
you can't announce it yet.
I've just recoiled with anxiety. The idea that
You don't have to put this part in the podcast. It can be our secret.
I remember when we first started, I was so nervous that we wouldn't have a podcast out or a documentary out that month.
Oh, sure.
Because I was like, shit, people are going to have spent a whole month of this, and we would have made nothing because we had to convince someone to let us do it and then go do it and then edit it.
Yep.
I'm less weird about that now, I think. But
Well, now that you have a track record.
So what you're saying is now's the time to...
Oh, exactly.
Now's the time to...
Now the Patreon's bigger than ever.
Right. I mean, I've done the opposite, I guess, because now I'm renting a business in the Bay Area.
Right, yep.
So I guess I could have kept all that. And some IKEA furniture here, this podcast thing. I'm doing this wrong, Jim.
So you just take a photo of this room and then move back to wherever you were before and then use that as a blue screen of oh yeah, I'm still in that Emeryville office.
This is genius. This is the grift. This is how I make the same amount of money while also not doing the work I love.
That's Oh, you can still do the work. You just don't have to pay for the Emeryville rent.
Right. No, but then I have to stay at home while there's a screaming child, Jim.
Oh,
you
right.
know what that's
okay.
like, don't you?
Okay, so you put the child in this room.
Now it's just daycare.
Oh.
But also the child gets to play in this room full of cool video game shit, and I have to be at home in my bedroom.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's you got to raise them right.
If you have any suggestions on how I can grift our patrons, please, Patreon, or that's not the email address, podcast at noclip.video, let us know. I'm actually going to go to emails right now, if that's okay. I think we might have one or two other little bits of details, just make sure we covered everything off. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole shebang. There's a lot of other scuttlebutt out there. Oh, there's one other thing, which is that I guess the Source 2 VR tools and maybe Hammer 2. I'm not sure if the entire SDK is getting launched, but they have said that once the game is out, there will be some tools out there for people to make stuff with. And then the other thing as well, if you get an Index before the end of the year, they're going to be releasing some unique bonus stuff in the new year. It seems like you can explore some of the levels in the Index before the game comes out, but maybe it's not playable, maybe it's a demo, I don't know. And then they're doing some special CSGO content around Half-Life Alyx you'll get access to. There was some Dota stuff on there, but it got removed from the website, so presumably that's not the case anymore. But yeah, I think they're trying to basically get people to buy Indexes soon, and then placate them for 3 months while we wait for Half-Life Alyx. Wait, what if this game got delayed?
You just the wait makes it better. The wait is like it's really a Christmas present to you, the player.
Yeah, but like, it's what if you woke up on Christmas Day and your parents were like, "Hey, we're pushing Christmas back a couple of months. We want it to be really good."
Listen, a shitty Christmas is shitty forever, but a delayed Christmas might be good one day.
Wow. Okay, I like it. I like your optimism, Jim. That's good. First email coming in from Anthony Lavella. Anthony says, "Hi Danny and Jim. Half-Life and Half-Life 2 pushed video games forward in some very significant ways. Player-focused narrative with no cutscenes, emphasis on physics, etc., etc. So is it fair to expect Half-Life Alyx to follow suit? Does its VR-only status limit or enhance its potential influence? It seems like there's still a lot of room for innovation within the VR space. So is it fair to expect Valve to capitalize on that with their new game, or does that elevate expectations to an unrealistic level?"
I think the VR thing is going to be the innovation in this game. Like that, I'm pretty sure that wanting to deliver an incredible, like, innovative, most modern possible technology experience is why they never shipped Episode 3.
Right.
And wanting to ship this game, and in fact announcing it and having a ship date for it, kind of indicates to me that probably they just want to get something out the door. Like, do you remember when The Force Awakens came out, and it was the first Star Wars movie that people thought would be any good for like 30 years?
Right.
And they did that by just telling the same story again of the first movie. I really think that was just to wash the taste of your mouth out of the previous three decades.
Like, get the expectation finished with?
Right. Like, just people they're gonna want something that's familiar and perfect. And then after that's done, now we can do the new interesting stuff. So if there's going to be a new interesting Half-Life game, it's probably going to be the next one.
So what about if that's flipped? What if they do want to make more Half-Life games, but not just the expectation of having to make a really good game, but also the expectation of this sort of lineage of being groundbreaking technology? What if, like, that's too much for one game? So Half-Life Alyx is kind of like, okay, we're going to do the innovative techie stuff over here, and then hopefully you'll kind of get off our arse a little bit about we can make a more standard first-person shooter over here. Because, like, what's like Half-Life Episode 3, if they do it, or Half-Life 3, like, what there is, like, where is the innovation space in the FPS at this stage? Like, is there any, or is it so far down that
I think that we are, for like most of the 90s and early 2000s, there was so much of a focus on new technology, as like, this is how games advance, that now that we're kind of out of that explosion space where graphics cards aren't twice as good every year, we're a little bit, I think we can look back on that and see what kind of horseshit that was.
Right.
Like that kind of denied, that sort of overshadowed any attempt to do any real gameplay innovation at that same time. So I'm much more, and I don't know what their plans are. Like, maybe they really do want to do that. Maybe they really do want to, like, no, let's put the focus on the technology first and foremost. But I'm much more interested in seeing innovation in storytelling, innovation in gameplay. And I have to imagine that, and the Campo Santo people seem to be on the same page with me about that. So if they're like heavily involved with the storytelling and design on this thing, I bet we're on the same page. It's
right.
hard to know for sure, but
so what about the whole issue of this being VR only? Like, how influential can a game be that's...
Yeah, I think it's certainly going to take up a lot of people's mind share because Half-Life does. But also Half-Life was always a PC product, and PC has always played second fiddle to consoles. Like, I feel like even though I personally don't think of Halo first, Halo is probably the more influential game.
Right. You think in terms of like console FPS design?
In terms of like
just FPS design?
In terms of its influence. its design influence, and also the mind share of just the number of players on the planet who've played the series.
Right. Yeah.
I haven't actually run the numbers, but
Like Counter-Strike Go is like the most popular
or like
first-person
maybe
game Valve has ever made.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and I think Team Fortress 2 is next. So,
Right.
like Ricochet is down the bottom, but like Half-Life's closer probably, especially the first Half-Life.
Right.
I imagine. Next email comes in from Robert Crandall, who says, given that Valve has said this game will be comparable in length to Half-Life 2, how do you want the average play session to be, or how long do you want it to be? How important do you think placing is going to be for a long-form narrative VR game? Half-Life's kind of, I guess it had chapters, but it wasn't like levels ended. Like,
yeah, Half-Life wanted you to play the whole game in one sitting.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not the first one, because that was an incredibly long game, but 2 certainly. When I was replaying 2, a lot of the time I didn't even see the chapter. It would show like chapter 2, whatever the name of chapter 2 was.
Especially these days because the font is so much smaller.
Right.
If you're playing on a high resolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Forget about Freeman, or even Half-Life 1, it comes up so small. Yeah.
Follow Freeman. Yeah. It was just a lot of the time I missed the chapter breaks. And it really just drives you forward continuously. I think they're certainly going to be taking into account people's neck endurance in this design here, to the point where they probably want you to be able to play it continuously, but they've got to have a little bit more design respect for your endurance than they did in the previous games, just because like it would otherwise they're going to cause injuries.
Standing as well.
Yeah.
Like I've done the standing desk thing.
I wouldn't be
sometimes.
surprised if they support a sitting mode.
Right.
If they're supporting a bunch of different movement types.
Yeah, good point. If the locomotion thing sort of takes care of some of that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like bending over is there's a lot of things that are kind of impossible to do or hard to do if you're sitting in a chair, like leaning or,
That's
or
true.
kneeling or any of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Amir says, as someone who doesn't have any relationship with the Half-Life franchise, do you think this announcement to be mainly for the diehard OG fans, or possibly to bring new people into the fold as well? Also, the 2 big obvious questions, why VR and why not Half-Life 3? I think we've answered the other ones maybe a little bit. I mean, I do feel like Valve is deep in the VR hole. They have been for years.
I think the reason they're making this game is to sell their VR product.
Yeah. In terms of, I think it marries well in terms of their commercial desires to get VR into people's houses, to get Valve VR into people's houses, and also, like, it does kind of fit with the Half-Life. I think Portal would probably actually be a better match. Maybe like they just seem smaller spaces. Maybe the locomotion problem is an issue there.
I think it would be probably a more interesting, maybe better fit for VR, like you were saying, but it wouldn't get people as excited.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know. I think my other part of this is that I don't think, or I hope this won't. I don't think, in earnest, this will be a sloppy execution of a game, because if they, Valve isn't exactly in a lot of people's good books at the moment. It's always had people who have been like diehard fans, and it's always had people who are critics. But I do feel like there's a pretty big sea change against Valve for the past
there
couple
is
of years.
Like people like I'm among them. A lot of people have a problem with how Steam has been run.
Yeah,
but I think a single Half-Life game, like if they released a full-on Half-Life game, a traditional desktop mouse-controlled game, they would be back in 90% of those people's good sides almost immediately.
Right.
So I think this is a very smart move on their part.
But they're not releasing that, right?
Right. No, but something that is close to that,
right,
is a smart move.
I guess it can also really stir the hornet's nest to be like, because there are people who are hearing this news and being super disappointed because they're, it is a big buy-in. Like, it's an expensive piece of kit, and especially when you consider it's probably only for, maybe this is the only VR game you care about. Like, I remember, hey man, I bought Quake 3 and was like, oh shit, I need an OpenGL graphics card.
Yeah.
Like, I better spend what little money I had as a teenager. It cost like €280 or something.
Yeah.
It was like every 2 months of work to afford it, and it was mostly for that one game. Unreal Tournament ran on a 3DFX card. Didn't need it.
Yeah, it's hard for me to get too mad about that when you needed a $2,000 PC to run Half-Life.
Right.
So
that's true. When Half-Life 2 came out as well, we had. It felt like we had a year to buy your computer for Half-Life 2.
Yeah.
Like it was telegraphed. This is what you're going to need to
Right.
to get. Yeah, I guess.
And that's another thing about being outside of the graphics explosion is that they'll just keep my PC for 8 years and it'll be fine.
Yeah, you can Spelunky run on anything.
That's right.
At this stage, keep playing Minecraft.
You're running that on your Vita TV.
The Steam. What's the Steam one called again?
It's like
the TV thing.
I think of it as the Steam box, but I'm not sure what its actual name is.
They were selling those for $1 at one stage.
Right.
On
Yeah.
Steam. Yeah. I used one. I have one at home. We use it every once in a while. Oddly enough, Spelunky was the game we played the most on it. And then I just got Spelunky on PS4 and it didn't matter anymore. Nick Rugan says, 2 questions. Doesn't VR effectively shut out anybody with accessibility issues, aging eyesight, those without use of their full limbs, etc.? Without full use of their limbs. How do you think they are going to deal with the forward momentum problem presented in current VR games, aka the only way to move forward is by teleporting? I guess the accessibility issue is kind of... That's the case with practically
and
all
it also
of VR.
Invents new accessibility issues because some people can't use VR because they get motion sick.
Right.
Has anybody figured out how to do subtitles in VR yet?
God, I'm trying to think about... I mean, I have read text in games.
Okay, sure.
So,
that's
like...
Good enough, yeah.
But
you'd have to place it in the world, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember... It's always in the world. It doesn't move with your head.
Right.
Which felt weird because your head moves when you read subtitles a bit. Well, it depends how close
sure,
you are.
yeah.
But when you're in VR, it tends to. Yeah, if anyone has any experience with that, I'd be interested to know. Because presumably, it'd be really strange in VR because you're often not looking directly at the person who's talking.
Yeah.
So where do they... Like, if you're looking up when they talk, do the subtitles get blasted on the ceiling?
Yeah.
Or do they sit off the
they've
UI?
They've got to mark up every level with, like, here are the surfaces we can put the subtitles
right?
on.
Yeah. God, there's so many technical hurdles with this sort of stuff. Jacob asks, as somebody who owns an Index and will be getting this game for free, should I jump right into the game, or am I better off watching a playthrough of the old versions first? This person exists. I didn't think this person exists, but they do. Maybe it depends on the person. I have no nostalgia for this series of PC FPS games at all from that era, as I was a Nintendo gamer up until around 2013. So Jacob has never played a Half-Life game.
But lots of Mario games.
Which is... There are jumping puzzles in Half-Life 1, quite a lot of them.
That's true.
Actually.
It's hard to say, it's hard for me to picture the experience of playing Half-Life out of its context. Like, I have to imagine that, like, almost all of the good ideas from that game have been used exhaustively in games since then, and so, like, playing that would be like a tropey mess of tiny, blurry rectangles.
Yeah, it's like when I had never really seen the original Star Wars movies,
right? Yeah,
in their entirety, and like I want to say last year or 2 years ago I watched them, and I felt like I'd watched this movie
1,000 times in the past. Yeah, yep.
Different people, in different places.
Yeah, and Half-Life 2 less so, but probably still similar. Like Half-Life 1 didn't really even have characters.
Yeah.
It kind of had the 3 scientists that were copy and pasted that had it had moments, and they would assign okay, this scientist is going to say this cool line, and then he'll appear again 10 minutes later to say a different cool line.
Dr. Kleiner died a lot in Half-Life 1.
That's true. By your own hand.
Yeah, as well.
You shot him as you popped out of the dumpster.
The next question actually is an interesting one in relation to that. Jeremy Tashuk asks, are you expecting Barney and some of the other important side characters are going to be included in the game? Also, are we going to see what Wallace Breen and his... are we going to get to see Wallace Breen and his administration? Will be interesting to get some backstory on the other cast members after seeing it in Half-Life 2. It is funny how Half-Life 2 basically just retconned all these characters. Barney became one person. He became specifically the Barney who let you in.
From Blue Shift, yeah.
That's the one. Sorry, it was the one from Blue Shift.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember Otis?
The
fat Barney?
The other guard model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gearbox's addition to the Half-Life
Half-Life lore, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry. It gets much more exciting when Duke Nukem Forever turns out to be in the Half-Life universe.
Right. So one actual note about this, which I didn't bring up, is that it looks like Alyx's voice actor is changing. Eli's
She sounded the same in the trailer.
So, one of the things that came up in Tyler McVicker's latest Valve's News Network thing is that it sounds like to him, it sounds like there are two different voices in that trailer. And and to me, it could have been the same person, but certainly the first voice that speaks sounds identical to Alyx. So the issue apparently is a lot to do with the fact that when Merle Dandridge recorded Alyx originally, that was 16 years ago.
Right.
This game is set before that, so presumably Alyx is slightly younger or a little younger. I'm not saying voice actors can't do young voices, but according to Greg Boomer, the line here, I think this is from Polygon, casting choices are incredibly hard, especially considering the time gap. With the game being a prequel featuring an even younger Alyx, and when we heard Ozima's, I want to say this right, Ozioma, I want to say is the name of the new voice actress. It's a bad day for me pronouncing names. Apologies. When we heard her performance, we knew we'd found the right Alyx. One of the real regrets we have about so much time passing, however, between games is that we lost Robert Guillaume, who is the voice actor for Eli Vance. The new voice of Eli, James Moss Black, has big shoes to fill, but we're all excited about his performance and can't wait for players to hear it. I remember getting the book, Raising the Bar, the Half-Life 2 book, and them showing who the voice actors were and also who the faces were based off of.
Right.
The weirdest one, and I think it's even weirder now, considering just sort of like inequality in America these days, is that the original model for Eli Vance was a homeless guy that lived outside of Valve's office.
Still there, probably.
Well, hopefully. I mean, it's been a long couple of... Well, hopefully he's not there. Really. Hopefully he's still around. But yeah, one of the... I mean, Barney is based off of... What's the guy's name? I forget his name. He's like the business guy at Valve.
Oh, sure.
A bunch of them are Gordon is a makeup of like 3 or 4 different people. Although... I'm sure that model's going to change now as well as the
yeah, I'm just thinking about like the Rare folks talking about how like every employee at Rare ended up as a face in GoldenEye because they just had like there were basically the only difference between any of those guard models was like this one face texture, like a 32 by 32 texture probably.
How did GoldenEye have different faces before? That came out before Half-Life, didn't it? Did it? Around the same time?
I think it was the same year.
Was it the same year? Was it 1998?
Well, it's just because they're...
1995? Oh, no, that's the movie. Yeah. So Pierce Brosnan does predate Half-Life. 1997. Came up before. Slightly. Right?
I think Half-Life was also 97.
I thought it was 98.
This is great air.
Oh, man.
What a good podcast.
Yeah, 98. November 1998.
Okay, so it was a year later. Yeah, I mean, it's really... I think it's just because they spent so little texture budget on the face.
Right.
Because it was going to be viewed via a blurry texture renderer and then a blurry TV. So, like, as long as you could barely tell that's Pierce Brosnan... and then
yeah, when you're shooting somebody who's made up of 14 polygons, maybe you're not watching the face all that much. So what do you think of, I guess, let me remix Jeremy's questions a little bit. Who would be...
I really think the most important thing here is to find out what happened to that homeless guy.
Right. That's the investigative journalism we need to do.
This is your next documentary.
Is to find out... Yeah, give me an easy one. Why don't you, Jen? Jeez.
Sorry, what were you?
Who would be, if you weren't playing Alyx, who would be the character from the Half-Life universe? Half-Life 1, Half-Life 2, Half-Life Episode 1 or Episode 2 that you would like to play?
I want to play Breen after Breen escaped into like... Yeah, apparently he was going to be like melded with some like alien form and sent into a hell dimension or something like that.
The Episode 3.
At the end of Half-Life 2. Well, I don't remember what happened in Episode 1 and 2. I'm just thinking, I'd only replayed Half-Life 2 recently. But I'm super curious what happened to him, Slug Breen.
Yeah, he wasn't even in Half-Life 1. He got retconned in.
He was ostensibly the director or the administrator of that facility, but never actually appeared even in voice form.
Yeah, I think the G-Man refers to him at some stage, or somebody refers to the G-Man looking for the administrator or something.
That sounds right, yeah.
I would love... Who would I... I would love... do you remember your man... Is it... you've played Half-Life 2 more recently than I have. The weird British guy with the mutton chops on the road.
Oh yeah,
Bumbridge or something.
I don't remember his name.
He was
That
such a weird character.
A very strange insertion into that world. Yeah,
He was so weird. I think he was in a bunch of. He felt to me like a character that they had done a bunch of, like that was meant to be a bigger thing, and then they reduced it down to this one. I mean, the rocket, the fight you do with the, whatever they call the flying helicopter guy, the combine ship, and the rockets. That's a fun fight, but like he's like overwritten or something.
Yeah, it really does feel like he meant to play a bigger part later on, maybe.
Yeah, it never happened.
Or maybe they just had that voice actor in and was like, we really like this guy.
Right.
He's really doing a good job.
What about one if you're Dr. Kleiner? I want to hear more of his. What's that guy's name? I forget that guy's name.
I think it was just Kleiner.
No,
the actor.
The actor, the voice actor guy. He's got that science podcast.
Really? I should listen to this.
Yeah, I think he's still doing. He's like he does like improv and stuff.
Does he still have the defanged pet head crab?
Lamar.
Yeah.
Hedy Lamar.
Hedy
right?
Lamar.
Yeah. That's actually we have our Gordon Freeman skeleton over here in the studio behind you, Jim.
Oh wow!
Which we're now going to have to.
You gotta put that crowbar in his hand somehow.
He's back. Well, I guess he's not back. Alyx is back. Presumably, he'll probably appear in this game, or they'll talk about him in messianic terms, like they tend to do. The savior, the one guy who killed a bunch of fucking soldiers. I guess that's why he's famous. Oh, I guess he killed the big baby as well.
Right. Yep.
Nidalanth or whatever. That's a podcast. Thanks so much for everyone for sending in the questions. Podcast at noclip.video. Jim, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
Swing on by. We'll do it. Let's make it a date. Whenever Half-Life Alyx comes out in 2020 or 2021 or 2022, we should get you over to play.
All right.
That'd be down?
That sounds great.
Awesome. See, I'm making friends.
Yeah.
Making East Bay friends. And you can introduce me to more people so you don't feel obliged to come on our podcast every other week. I am going to go on Topic Lords as well.
Oh, excellent. Yes. Topic
Lords,
Lords, the only place on the internet where you can hear topics discussed.
By Lords.
By Lords.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go check it out. It's on everywhere podcasts are sold. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Thanks to everyone who's been reviewing our podcast. Please keep those coming if you can. That'll be awesome. We are currently in post-production on Outer Wilds. We finished that documentary filming last week. It was really cool. We're going to get that out in December. We have a bunch of interesting stuff coming to the Patreon and new tiers.
Do you want to do another hour just on Outer Wilds right now?
Have you played Outer Wilds?
I played like half of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's half of Outer Wilds, really? That's a. Wait, we're talking about
Just-
Outer Wilds,
just
not Wilds,
Outer.
right?
Yes, not the Fallout clone.
Okay, not that.
No, I'm talking about the space exploration game that I still haven't really figured out what it is.
Let's give it 3 minutes to this.
Okay.
And let's say that it could be spoilery. So if you've not played Outer Wilds or you want to, stop listening right now. Thank you so much. See you later. See you next week.
Later.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's incredible. I think it's the first half of Outer Wilds. Like I'm terrified of this game. Like it took me days to work up the strength to like land on Giant's Deep, because it was just like ocean planet is the most terrifying idea to me. I still haven't gone under the water.
Right. You're gonna have to.
Yeah. Good. Okay. The planet with that's like an outer shell collapsing with the black hole inside of it. You have to fucking go underground there and like use this series of like tractor beams tunnels that you go through. And, like, they're kind of shitty tractor beams where you fall out all the time.
Into a black hole.
And you have to fucking jetpack back in. And I know what's on the other side of the black hole. It doesn't kill you or anything. But it's still just, like, looking down is just terrifying.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm really impressed with this game. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you don't care about the spoilers. So you probably already know how this game works. But, like, you are exploring like the ruins of I think multiple alien civilizations, in this like spaceship made of leather and wood because one of the civilizations took all the metal out of your planet.
It's I love learning about that world and like all that history stuff, and it bounces around a lot between the Nomai, I guess, which are the sort of progenitor race, and then the Harthians, which are the folks that you're one of those. It bounces around the history of that like solar system, I I guess, in really interesting ways.
Yeah.
It's one of the best games I've played in years. I absolutely fell in love with it. It's just got like, I guess one of the things that we talked to him about, and they're a really small team. It's like 9 people.
Right.
Is that they were trying to make a game where knowledge was the only reward.
Right.
And it totally nails that. Like it's
Yeah.
it's like the thing that everyone talked about Breath of the Wild doing really well, which is like, oh, you don't have objectives, which is bullshit. And then just like Zelda's fucking, it's half a Ubisoft game, but some of the best parts of that game are the things that you do on your own. But Outer
Right.
Wilds is only that.
Yeah, it's just the incredible stuff.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I've had a lot of like wow moments. Like first time I took off, I literally knew nothing about it. I didn't know it was a space game. I knew nothing about it when I played it. First time in the black hole, the first time you die, all that sort of stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
it's something special.
Really cool.
All right, we should get you back again.
All right.
Now you've just reinvited yourself again to talk about the Outer Wilds once the doc is out. Cheers, Jim.
See you guys later.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Patreon.com/Noclip if you want to support our work. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you're in the States. I hope you have a wonderful normal ass weekend if you're the rest of the world. We'll see you in December with some exciting new stuff. Talk to you then. Good luck.